Well, if we think that enough people are here, I say let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Chris. First, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for your presence here. It is a pleasure to see you. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid disturbing background noises. If you want to speak, please raise your hand and unmute yourself during the meeting when the speaker offers the opportunity. Please use the chat only for study session related questions, and use headphones if you can to improve sound quality and to reduce echo background noises when speaking. And please do not type when your microphone is not muted. The session will be recorded for future study purpose use. The videos will be made available to the public in the Urantia Association YouTube channel. Turn off your camera if you do not like your image being used for records, and ask to speak off the record at any time when you do not want your site to be part of the videotape. In this way, your part will be cut out of the video during editing. About this new cycle is the Urantia International Association Education Committee will be hosting monthly webinars with different speakers and themes related to the Urantia Book and organizational activities of service to the Urantia community. In this first webinar, Chris Woods will speak about Lifting Together, the Future of Urantia Association. This presentation was developed to share with the growing Global Urantia Community the goals, plans, and vision for the International Service Board for the next 3 years and beyond. Chris has been active in the Urantia community for 20 years now. He has served in various capacities for several conferences, boards, and committees, including 5 years as the president of the International Service Board of Urantia Association. Chris lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, USA, with his talented wife and growing voice, and works as an air traffic controller. He spends his spare time toiling in the beginning stages of coffee roasting, soap making, and woodworking. Thank you, Chris. The webinar is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. I would like to begin with just a short moment of silence so we can all gather ourselves and be put into a nice communal space. I want to thank you all for coming. So, even though it appears as if I'm a younger person who would seem master these technological miracles we have in front of us, I am not that person. So I will be fumbling throughout this presentation, trying to get the right things on the screen and trying not to be distracted by the very large picture of myself that's glaring back at me. For Christmas, one of my 4-year-old son went to the dollar store and bought a big tub of hair cream and gave it to me. And now that I'm looking at myself in this giant screen, I'm thinking maybe I should start using it. But ego aside, here we go. I guess my point, though, about this technology is that I don't always see everybody's hands. I see about 16 people at one time. I see there's 34 people in this meeting. So if you would like to speak up and interrupt me, just do so politely, and I won't mind at all. I want this to be a conversation and not a presentation, although I have plenty to present if no one else has anything to say. That said, it's hard to give the history of Urantia Association without trying to give an interpretation of history which is controversial. Nonetheless, Urantia Association began in the 1990s with an intense focus on the international Urantia community, which is to say the Urantia community outside of the United States and also somewhat outside of Canada. Our early leaders came from Australia, they came from Finland, and because of that, our culture as well as our bylaws and charter were written so that we could expand internationally. And this happened to coincide with the expansion of internet technologies that allowed for meetings to happen simultaneously throughout the world without any lag time. So we could have an international representative council that could meet live either via email or even now using these video services and make decisions that affect the entire Urantia community or Urantia Association, and do so without having everyone having to fly into one location. This has led to a great expansion of the cultures that are now contributing to the greater Urantia community, and I think it's to our benefit. When I became international president 5 years ago, I walked in as Gaetan was walking out, and we discussed how things would be going forward. And he had ideas for how the Urantia community would evolve. And I had ideas as to how, my instincts said that the Urantia community would evolve. And then we went on a talking tour, and we talked to people throughout the United States. We talked to people throughout Europe, and did a listening tour in Latin America to find out everyone's ideas and how they would like to see things evolve. From this, we've had 5 years of development, and through experimentation and ideas, we are now moving, it seems, toward a concrete plan that'll guide us at least through the next 3 years, which is to say through the end of my presidency, and probably further into the future. So that said, I will share my screen. And so let's talk about this. So for the last 4 years, which is say between 2013 and 2017, the association has embarked on numerous projects, and our guiding philosophy has always been and will always remain to foster study groups, to train teachers, and to train leaders. Now, we've learned things throughout the few years, including that these terms might be outdated or needing a revision. Certainly, what is a study group has changed even in the last 2 or 3 years. That I remember, 12 years ago, I would attend a week, was on the phone, and we would all technologies. And we see this continuing to evolve so a study group remains, people gathering together in a living room, but it certainly is more than that. We've learned that in some cultures, the term leader is a loaded term. We've learned that, especially in places that have large government turnover every few years, that the term leader has been used by dictators and people who are not friendly of the people. And so maybe we need to update that term for every culture. But because I come from the United States, because I speak English, we still use the term leader and to train teachers and train leaders. However, our organizational philosophy has evolved these last few years. Mainly, we have shifted from being a membership organization to being a service organization. The membership organization model that was designed to serve a pre-internet society. How things used to work is if you lived in Los Angeles in the United States and you read the Urantia Book and you wanted to find other Urantia Book readers, You would write a postcard to Urantia Brotherhood and asking for other readers in Los Angeles. They would consult their database or card index of other readers in Los Angeles, and they would send you a list of names for people in your own neighborhood. And that has been the membership model. And then they would let you know if there was a conference nearby. They would let you know of the general membership conferences and activities that might be happening that you'd be interested in. And that model was great for the pre-internet age. But Facebook and Google have completely replaced that model. And if that was the point of our organization, then we could fold up shop and know that everything would continue to be well served. So we can no longer do that. That's no longer what we're trying to do. Instead, we've moved to being a service organization. So now we're focused on the projects at hand and executing these projects at the local, the national, the continental, and the global levels, rather than merely gathering more members. So our purpose is no longer to get more and more people to add to our database to join as members, but rather to have more and more projects that are executed throughout the world. Incidentally, since we've shifted this philosophy, our membership has gone up significantly. I believe in the last 6 months, we've had 2 new national associations join. We've had 2 more that have applied to become full national associations in the last few months, and probably with this year or early next year, they will be chartered. So we're growing fast, and more people are wanting to come together to do projects. And so our work continues to increase. And then the second major shift that we've had is a shift to continental leadership. The way that our charter and bylaws are designed is that each national association that comes in has an equal voice in our International Representative Council. And what we've shifted to in the last few years has been a continental level model, so that the members and associations in Europe are coming together and doing European projects together. They're raising European money to execute the European projects. Same thing in Latin America. The Latin Americans are coming together, deciding their own projects, electing their own leaders, and going through with their own priorities. In North America, we're trying to move toward that same model, but in this, North America is lagging behind for various reasons. In Africa, we see it happening right now. In fact, what this model has allowed the International Service Board to do is to hand off all projects that are happening in organized continents to those continental leadership groups. And it allows the International Committee to focus more and more of our attention onto the parts of the world that we would call, in development for their Urantia activities. So right now, a disproportionate amount of our attention is focused on Africa, because that is where new Urantia Book students are coming together, more study groups, especially using internet technologies. More and more people are coming together and wanting to meet. We're having a conference in April. 1 week after the Amsterdam conference, we'll have a conference in Accra, Ghana. And right now, I think they're talking about 80 leaders from across that Gold Coast of Africa, I believe is what it's called, from about Senegal all the way through Nigeria. We'll have some other guests coming in from other parts too, including Cameroon. Hopefully Zambia and Malawi will be represented. But these type of organizational events have increased the last few years in Africa, and it's where the international community will be focused. Once Africa has a functioning continental leadership group, then the International Committee will be able to turn our attentions to whatever part of the world is next. So that could be India, that could be China, it could be any number of spots, just depending on where the where the Urantia Book seems to be popping up and the teachings seem to be taking hold. We know that the foundation plans on publishing a Chinese translation at some point, and my guess is around that time is when we'll be turning our attention to China. So this has been the new model, and it's working well. Because of this, not only are we seeing more activities happen, but we're seeing more ownership of these activities, that more and more people are stepping forward to take on leadership roles. So Antonio Schaefer was our first European continental coordinator. And a few months ago, he stepped aside, and Sebastian Nosy has stepped in to take his place. Wilson Leon was elected as the first Latin American continental coordinator, doing their work. And it allows for this decentralized view of the Urantia community to really take hold. So I believe, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I believe that the Urantia book was in danger of it becoming a North American phenomenon, that it was becoming more and more synonymous with the United States culture and the way that we look at the world. And because of this decentralized activities, because of the rise of Europe and Latin America as sources of leadership, as sources of education, and of culture for the Urantia community, we are seeing more of a balance now. A balance between the European ideas and ideals versus the Latin American ideas and ideals versus North American ideas and ideals. And we want to add Africa in there, and then the Asian communities as well, so that the Urantia book does not become a phenomenon of any one culture, but rather is a balance of all the cultures in the world. And in fact, it will be exciting to see some, one teaching from the Urantia book, one section of the Urantia book, and how it's interpreted and enacted in people's lives in different places, in different cultures, and different life experiences. That this will really add to the experience of what it means to study the Urantia book in an experiential way. So that's where we've been the last 4 or 5 years or so. And we have some goals going forward for the next 3 years. So in October, the International Service Board traditionally does a meeting once a year. This last October, we did it dispersed through 3 locations throughout the world. So the North American members met in Kansas City. The European members met in Barcelona. The Latin American members, they might have only met via Zoom, actually, but they met with everyone who, not just the International Service Board members, but all the leaders in Latin America came together and meet. And Barcelona, European leaders came together to meet, to elect some leadership, as well as to set some goals and some projects going forward. And in Kansas City, the same thing. We invited many leaders to come together. And then we all met together as national groups and as continental groups, and we tried to set some international goals. So these are our goals going forward. By 2020, we're calling these the 2021 goals. We will continue our shift to continental thinking. We want to have cohesive and self-sufficient continental working groups in Latin America and Europe, as well as planning for greater coordination in North America and in Africa. This will help the ISB be able to focus on areas of the world that we term developing. One of the things that's come out of the last couple of years has been a united theme. So for the last 3 years, this being the last few months of this cycle, we have focused on the theme of Jesus as a teacher. Amsterdam will be the end of that cycle and the introduction of the next cycle, which will be living the teachings. So we will ask, it's not a requirement, but we will ask local and national and continental groups at their conferences, at their meetings, to consider this theme of living the teachings and everything that might go into it. And to do so for the next 3 years. And then in 2021, when we have our next international conference, that'll be the theme of that conference, bringing together all of our experiences at conferences throughout the world that we can then share together and present. We have found that this united theme has really brought people together and brought great interest into the Urantia activities. It's helping to unite conferences. So, for example, the Budapest conference that happened about 1.5 years ago happened the same weekend as a conference in Australia, and they shared the same theme. And so, because of that, they were able to, have this parallel track of conferences and themes that are happening literally halfway across the world from each other. We want to continue to foster study groups, including two goals. One is simply to produce a how to start a study group from scratch guide, which seems to be a theme, especially for people who want to start a new study group. This is something that we've experienced in my community, because the Green Bay study group in Green Bay, Wisconsin, United States, which is where I live, our study group literally died off. Every other member except for me and my wife has died in the last 5 years. And so my wife and I are now starting from scratch. And we're not quite sure how to do that. And we've had to talk with the study group committee and talk with people about how they've done it in the past. Of course, we've reached out to anyone within 50 miles of us who we know who read the Urantia book, but there's not a lot of us. And so we have started a discussion group, a spiritual discussion group, our home, and inviting people in. And we let them know that we read the Urantia book, and our discussions will be influenced by that, but they can bring in their own discussions. And we're trying to start a study group from that to get people interested in the Urantia book through that way, and seeing if in the next few years a Urantia group can pop up out of that. We don't know if it'll work for Green Bay, but we hope it will. But these are the type of experience that I think a lot of people are having, and we'd like to be able to share that throughout the community. And so our International Study Group Committee is focused on that, on how to start study groups from essentially nothing. And second, we want to triple the number of known online study groups, which frankly is a pretty small goal, because the number of known online study groups is expanding rapidly. And so what we know is that these are going to continue to grow, and what we want to be able to do is help coordinate them. Which brings us to our education goals for training teachers and training leaders, one of which is the new online calendar for webinars and online study groups, the Join Now calendar. We know that Urantia community, we all have calendars out there for upcoming conferences, upcoming events, and that's fine and dandy, but we also know that only about, and I'm kind of guessing this number here, but I'm guessing about 5% of the number of Urantia books that have been sold and distributed throughout the world, that we know whose hands those ended up in. That 90 or so percent, and maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but the vast majority of Urantia books in the world, we don't know who has them, we don't know who's reading them, and they're not participating in our Urantia community. And so we want to be able to introduce a Join Now calendar for people so that they can interact with the Urantia community from the safety of their behind their computer desks. And so we want to be able to say that if they're interested, they can click the Join Now and be shuttled off to a study group that might be happening in Australia, or one that's happening in Boulder, or a conference. They can peek in a conference that's going on in Bogota or Sao Paulo. So that people can be introduced to the Urantia community and know that we are just nice, normal people. And they might want to interact with us on a one-to-one basis from there. We've seen already this increase in webinars and Zoom meetings for general education purposes and for teachers and future leaders. We've seen throughout Latin America, especially, these training seminars that are happening for training the future leaders of the association and of our communities, and as well as these general education and information seminars that are happening like this one. We also want to play a lead role in the formation of the Center for Urantia Book Studies, which has changed the name, of course, since this presentation was developed. I think they're now the International Center of Urantia Studies, I believe, because Cubs was already taken and we didn't want to be confused with that. So for those who don't know, this is an experiment and we don't know exactly what's going to come out of it, but Urantia Foundation, Urantia Book Fellowship, Urantia Association, as well as the Urantia Book Internet School and the Urantia University. Representatives of those 5 organizations are meeting and discussing forming a new Center for Urantia Studies that will combine live classes as well as webinars and online study groups, to produce well-educated people in the Urantia book and in our Urantia studies. We know that we've been told to study the fourth epical revelation and help to have that, to learn the lessons we can to help us guide the fifth epical revelation. We know that one of the things that Jesus and his apostles did was that they had an organized way of studying the Urantia book, or of studying their revelation, and of passing the teachings along, and each person taught to their experience and to their expertise. And the apostles taught the disciples, who taught the masses, and everyone had this organized way, and the Urantia community has lacked that organized training way. And so the way I'd like to see it is that this is an attempt to bring together some sort of organized study and dissemination of the Urantia book in an academic way. Right now, they're still in the proposal phase. We don't know. They're going to bring to the 5 organizations a proposal sometime, hopefully this year, at which point we will know if it is a project that the organizations want to support or not. But at least right now, we think it could be a good tool for the future. And finally, we want to continue to encourage cultural exchanges. When we talked to the local and national associations about ideas that they liked, one of them that they almost universally liked was this ambassador, what we were calling an ambassador program, but really it was a cultural exchange program where we made, so if a conference was happening in Latin America, the national associations made sure they were sending representatives to that conference. If there was even a national conference happening in, say, Brazil, people from throughout Latin America would send representatives to that national event. And this cultural exchange was happening at the continental level. And that has really helped form a cohesive bond throughout that continental community. We've seen the same thing happening in Europe. And so we want to continue that cultural exchange. So we'll do this through, of course, through our web-based cultural exchange groups, through intercontinental travel, but also, I really believe that we're almost on the edge of having a technology where we can have a plenary speaker who is in, Green Bay, who's giving a speech at a conference in Accra, and have it be a live event, have there be back and forth between the audience, and so that it can really bring together these experiences where maybe you have 3 conferences happening on 3 different continents, but they're sharing plenary speakers. I don't think we're quite there, right? I mean, we've all experienced being kicked out of one of these webinar meetings. In fact, I'm anticipating that I'll be kicked out here any minute. But we're right on the edge of that. So certainly I'm hoping by 2021, we will be able to have these things happen. And it'll really, it's changing our model for conferences, frankly. We used to have this model of local, national, and international conferences. Now we have many more continental conferences. And what's the value then of having an international conference? And what's the value of having these events if we serve more people by having more local and national and continental events that are happening simultaneously? And if they can share ideas directly, that maybe that's the next model for the global study of the Urantia book. We're not sure. This is an ongoing conversation, so we don't really know what the future will bring. So those are our goals for the next 3 years. And there's some, and obviously there are some internal goals that aren't nearly as exciting, including we need to rewrite our bylaws and update our charter to reflect how we're actually, operating and governing. But those are less exciting goals, so we'll skip over those. And so that's how we see ourselves developing over the next 3 years. And it's a lot of work, but we have good people dedicated to enacting them. So we've got, at the International Service Board, we have 7 different active permanent committees. those committee chairs, the 7 committee chairs, come from 5 different continents, from 7 different countries. Combined, they speak 7 different languages. They're able to represent and directly interact with the vast majority of Urantia Book students who are active in our community. And because of this, we're able to do more work and have active committees that are working globally towards reaching these goals. And so for me, it's been very exciting to be able to work and to participate in these. So if anyone has any questions, anything to discuss, this is a good halfway point to start this discussion. So please, I see about 16 hands, but I see 38 people in here. So if you have a discussion, raise your hand or just politely speak up. All right, hearing none. So this is where I am once again having, oh, here we go. Excuse me while I try to figure out how my computer works to get the next presentation loaded. I swear that one of these days, I'm gonna have, one of my children is gonna be old enough here in a few years to explain to me how my computer works. But until then, we're all gonna have to put up with me trying to figure it out by myself.
Chris, good afternoon to you.
Oh, hello, Gary.
How you doing, all right?
Yeah, doing well.
See a few people on there. Bennett, how you doing, Bennett? Hi, everybody from Wales. Very, very good presentation, Chris. And I know that you take a monumental task on following Gaetan. And as you know, being the membership chair for 2 terms myself, you've got to be in the oven to see what's cooking. And one of the things I'm looking at, I was at Accra last year and the year before, and it is an hotbed. It is something that's, you know, it's growing and growing. The one thing that I just like to point out, and when you go into the bylaws part of it, to take into consideration, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, that in Africa, when they read to form an association there, you need to have read the book completely. They love the Jesus section. And just wonder if there's any consideration on that, because there will be many more countries coming through if they haven't got to read it from A to Z. Please think about that. How because I'm sure that we'll have many more countries joining the Urantia Association. Thank you. I'm done.
So this has been a ongoing issue, and Gary knows this well, that we ask people to read the entire Urantia book to become a full member of the Urantia Association. But we often take people's word for it, whether they have or not. Now, we try to have discussions with people as the association is forming. So, you know, we're bringing together the 30 members to form a new national association. We have conversations with them to make sure that they actually have, you know, understand the entire Urantia book. I mean, there's not like a quiz that we give, but we try to make sure that they have a complete understanding. But oftentimes we're just taking people at their word, and that's the best we can do. There have been times where people have misrepresented themselves and how much of the Urantia book they've read, or what it is that they actually want to do with their Urantia activities. We are a trusting community by nature, and because of this, we have occasionally been taken advantage of by people who, I guess they must have thought we had some money. I have no idea what they thought they were doing, but they were sorely disappointed when they found out that our elected officials are volunteers and are spending their own money to travel across the countries, and that there would be no compensation for their activities. And then we've had people just disappear after finding these things out. So we before we form an association in any given country, we want to make sure they have a stable community. Usually that means that they have study groups that are already active. It means that they already have been doing some activities, some projects together. So like I said, as we're shifting from a membership organization to a service organization, you don't need to be a member of the association in order to put on a conference, in order to go to book fairs and put up a booth. We want to see people who are active in their projects already, so that we are just embracing a Urantia community that already exists, as opposed to trying to create a Urantia community out of the ether. And this, it's been successful the last few years because the ones that we've invited in have proven to be active. So, you know, it's always a challenge, especially for our membership chair and at the international level, to make sure that as our national associations ebb and flow, that we are helping those who are struggling while at the same time, you know, helping those who are wanting to expand. So thank you, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Chris, this is Eric. I have a question. But first of all, my English is not very good. The last occasion I had the chance to speak English was in the Congress in 2015. So excuse me if I may have some hesitations. I was wondering if we have any numbers about the average age of the readers in the world, because here in Quebec, I guess I'm just guessing, it may be like 65 years old, the age of the average reader. So this is my question.
Yeah, we don't have any good new information. We have information that's about 6 years old at this point, which, as far as information goes, means that it's outdated. About 6 years ago, the average age was up there. It was, I want to say it was in the late 40s or early 50s. And the number of years that a person had been studying the Urantia book was about 20 years. So that was the average person who would respond to the quiz that we sent out. And it was a joint effort between the foundation, the association, and the fellowship to really give a good survey of our memberships. Now, there's obviously certain limitations to that, including we're only really surveying the people who are willing to respond to such a quiz. And that means that there were entire populations that we just missed. From my travels, what I have found is that I have found very few, although there are some communities, but there's very few that have a nice, even distribution from, say, age 20 to 80. Instead, what we find is that there are pockets, that people are gathering together based on just who they feel comfortable with in their generation. So I go to a town, one town in Colombia, where I met with, it must have been about 35 people, and they were all under the age of 35. And that was the Urantia community there. And what they were doing is that they were opening up they opened up a storefront as a Urantia community center. And you know, they had their ideas. They put out a comic book based on the Urantia teachings. And, you know, those are the avenues they were pursuing. But then I go to other places and, you know, like you're probably experiencing up in Quebec, it's a much older population. And the fear is that at some point, an older population scares off a younger population. So someone who's 25 shows up at a study group and sees a bunch of people who are all 70, and they don't come back after 1 or 2 attempts. And that's just a person who we're not serving well as a Urantia community. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with our experiences with the internet and the web culture is to try to give people who, if they don't, you know, even if you live in a nice populated town and there's study groups nearby, maybe you just don't feel comfortable going to those study groups. So we're trying to give them a place to go to so that they still feel like they're a part of the Urantia community. And they can meet people of like minds, of like ages, like, life experiences. Yeah, the other interesting thing I like from that survey is that the number of years people were studying the Urantia book before they became active. So, people had often, at least according to the survey, they'd read the entire Urantia book. They'd even been reading it for a decade before they reached out and talked to other people who might be reading the Urantia book. That the study of the Urantia book is very much a personal and private affair, especially, your first few years with it. And so that's something that I think we all intuitively knew, that we were very private people, but that survey really brought it out, is that we can't pretend that we can track all the people in the world with the Urantia book, that would turn people away from the Urantia book. So some people are shocked and others are relieved to know that the International Association does very little to keep track of our international membership. We ask the local groups to keep a local member list. We ask the national groups to keep a national member list. But we don't ask them to send us their membership lists. We don't ask them to report back to us any of these things. We ask them to share with us their projects, to help coordinate their projects. And we encourage them to sign up for our international newsletters and our international activities so that we can better share what's going on and coordinate what's going on throughout the world. But we don't ask them to report back, because we don't want to be, to be seen as some sort of group that's international and wanting power turns people off. This is an experience we really learned in Europe, that especially with the growth of the European Union, they've had to take a lot of pains to ensure privacy throughout their countries, and we've had to essentially mirror the privacy policies of the European Union in order to be accepted by the European Association, which we've then mirrored in other countries because we think it's good and it's been successful for us. So thank you. Any other questions or ideas? I'm still trying to figure out how my computer works.
Chris, this is Andre.
Hi, Andre.
Do you want to perhaps just give a little more background on the International Center for Urantia Studies and why that's being thought of, just where things are going? That's been talked about. I've heard a little bit talked about, and there's an emphasis on teachers and leaders. Do you want to just expand on that for people?
Right. So these talks are still very much in their formation phases for the International Center of Urantia Studies. And I don't want to represent where the group is at, because the group is not at any one place. It is still very much a nebulous group of ideas that are evolving right now. That said, as communities come together, especially in the United States, but really throughout the world, one of the things that they inevitably end up doing is they start forming community service outreach places. And so one of those places is schools. Another one of those places are hospitals. And we saw this, going back to even what Jesus was doing. They formed schools and they formed hospitals. And so it's kind of natural, as our community is evolving, that we might want to start taking on that kind of project. And so in North America, where people have been reading the book for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, people are ready to turn to that type of project. And so that's where this really got born out of, is that sense of wanting to form a new type of educational center. Now, exactly what this educational center turns into is still unknown. Whether it's an internal, a school that's meant to serve the internal Urantia community, which is to say that we want to help people who are already studying the Urantia book to further study and really reach some depth of knowledge, whether we want this to serve the external community, which is to say that this will, in a certain number of years here, 30 years, become a real, an accredited university that has many tracks and many programs that people can come and join, just like there in the United States are, there's Presbyterian colleges, there's Quaker colleges, there's Mormon colleges that you can go and just get an education from, but that education is coming from that particular group's point of view. Or whether it's more of a, say, a community center type of place, and we see some models for that throughout the world that this group has been studying to see if that's the way to go, where it's not just an education center, but it's also a spiritual gathering center. It's also a philosophy gathering center. So you're coming together and you're learning some facts, you're learning some philosophy, you're learning some spirituality, and there's all these different tracks happening to serve the Urantia community. The way I'm looking at it, and this is just my point of view, is that the Urantia community has been expanding horizontally very well for the last, doing my quick math here, 60 years. And we've seen this group grow from just a small study group in Chicago to slowly spreading across the United States and North America, and as the languages came out, throughout the entire world and globe. And so we've seen this horizontal expansion of the Urantia community, but that this growth has been somewhat shallow. And so the next thing we need is some vertical growth, which is to say in-depth studies, so that we're not just having more and more people know about the Urantia book, but those people then are choosing to go really in-depth in their study and knowledge and grasp and execution of the ideas that are within the Urantia book. And then with this horizontal growth and vertical study then will come a depth of knowledge, which I would call spiritual growth, right? So, horizontal, we're spreading throughout the globe. Vertical, we're growing in depth in our study, and then a depth of spiritual understanding that comes from that. And that's how I think that we, at least in my experience, that has been how I have grown as an individual in my studies of the Urantia book, right? It's first just read the Urantia book once through, or try to read it as I can, and then a depth of study of the Urantia book. And then from that and trying to execute those teachings in my life has been a spiritual growth that has come from that, right? So I think that we would like to see if that can happen on a community-wide level, where we see the community horizontal growth, the community vertical understanding, and a community sense of spiritual growth. So that's how I'm approaching this center and what it can do. But I think if you asked, there's 6 people who are in these discussions, and there's plans to expand that group, and there's been plans to expand that group. It just hasn't happened. But you ask any of those 6 people, and each of them will give you a different answer as to why they think it's a good idea or what they want to see come from this project. So that's my answer. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that update. And good to see everyone. I have to run off, but very good to see you all.
See you in Amsterdam.
See you in Amsterdam. Yes, it'll be a lot of fun.
So, since we're halfway through, I'll give you a little amusing aside. I hope it's amusing, at least. As Jeannie said, I like to roast my own coffee. I buy the raw beans, and then I roast them up to various temperatures to try to experiment, and I mix them and I grind them and I brew my own coffee, and it's very fun for me. And my wife never drank coffee, and about 6 months or a year ago, she started drinking coffee, and she adds lots of sugar and she adds lots of cream to it. And then finally, she was at church actually, and taking a cup of their coffee, which was, what you expect from a large vat of coffee for it to taste like. And she liked it more because she didn't have to add as much sugar, as much cream to it to essentially make it palatable. So my wife has now bought a large box of instant coffee grounds, which she mixes with water and her cream and coffee, while I'm out in the garage painstakingly, lovingly roasting these coffee beans to perfection and letting them age and then grinding them and putting them together for my coffee each morning. And she just walks right past that to her instant coffee. So, yeah. So let's move along. There is a second presentation I'd like to share with you. If I can get it up there. Everyone's seeing some circles, right? An idea in my mind right now, although it's gotten to the point where I've given this presentation around enough that that I think it's taking some hold and people are starting to run with it. We talk about the Urantia community having a plan for the future, about having a plan that goes beyond 3 years at any given time. That, you know, that's part of what we ask our leadership to do, is to set a goal that's decades away and to start, you know, help steer the ship toward that goal. And the goal will shift and will change over time. It's not a concrete goal, but at least we're all trying to go in the same direction. So with that in mind, I wanted to see what I thought the Urantia community would look like in 50 years and to put some of those ideas to paper. And so this is the presentation that came out of it. And of course, like I said, all of these ideas are changing constantly. And so if you have ideas you'd like to share, you would be correct in doing so. As I said, we're shifting being a service project organization. We're a service-minded one. And so what does it mean then to serve the Urantia community and to serve the Urantia revelation? Let's see how we're doing here. So imagine, if you will, this graph of concentric circles with 6 layers of circles. This graph will represent the service work of the Urantia community, service circles, if you will. The centermost circle, as you can see, at the very center of our community is the protection of the text of the Urantia Book. This innermost circle at its core means the printing, translating, and distributing and protecting, especially the text of the Urantia Book. And we're seeing in the internet age, especially the protection of the text of the Urantia Book is important. And this is what we do. If we this community of about 20,000 people who are known Urantia Book readers right now throughout the world, roughly. If this community of 20,000 were to suddenly shrink down to 100, our primary goal then would be the protection of the text of the Urantia Book, to preserve it for future generations so that they could then re-expand out, right? The second circle is the education for Urantia Book students. This means the in-depth study and understanding of the teachings of the Urantia Book. It means organizing study of the book and conferences and the training of teachers and the training of leaders for this internal Urantia community, as well as training what I would call ambassadors and representatives of this internal Urantia community to the rest of the world. About 4 years, or I guess it's now 5 years ago, the association, the foundation, and the fellowship got together and we hired for a day a consulting group, a media consulting group, to come and give us advice as to how we might best represent ourselves in the media. And after a day of training and of working with us as a group and as individuals, their recommendation to us was to avoid the media at all costs, that we are not at all prepared to interact with the media on camera and barely even in print. And so there were a couple recommendations as to what to do if we absolutely had to interact with the media, but they said that we're not ready for it. And so what we mean by training ambassadors and representatives of this community means people who can represent the community as a whole in a thoughtful and outgoing way that makes us, that truly represents who we are and not who they want the Urantia community to be, right? That we represent us as good and normal people and a normal part of the religious cultures of the world. So these first two circles is what I would call for the internal Urantia community, right? This is what we do for ourselves, for our own sakes, so that we can grow as Urantia Book students. The remaining circles is for the what I would call the external community. So the next circle, then the third circle, is information outreach. This is dedicated to presenting the Urantia Book as a normal part of the religious cultures of the world. Some examples of this might be the work of Parliamentary World Religions or the work with the Interfaith Network. We also see this with concentrated effort for YouTube videos and web pages for the general public. I can imagine a college course, university, or a university course also being part of this, the representation of the Urantia Book as just a normal part of the religious cultures in the world. Part of what we asked the Urantia Association, the international community, to do 3 years ago was to flood the marketplace. It was to flood YouTube and to flood Google with information about the Urantia Book, because the videos that were available 3 years ago were not videos that well represented the Urantia community. And instead it represented fringe elements of people who read the Urantia Book and want to become the representatives of the Urantia Book as opposed to who we actually are. So we asked them to make a concentrated effort. And so the video I like to show of this, and I don't know if this is going to play. Do you guys hear audio at all?
Chris, I think
yes.
you need to stop sharing your screen, and when you begin when the window opens to share, you need to click on Share My Computer Sound first, and then you can play the video.
All right, so I'm not going to play this video then. That seems like the easier thing. And instead, what I'm going to do is tell you all to go to, Urantia Draw on YouTube, which is a Portuguese project that put out 7 videos using the draw technology about the Urantia Book. It's all in Portuguese. They're flooding that market in Portuguese. It's been translated into Spanish, and I think it's going to be translated and made available in English here soon. But that's the type of work that we say that we want to have information outreach. That's what we're talking about, is that when people are looking for information about the Urantia Book, that there are places that they can go that well represent the Urantia Book and its teachings. It's part of also the reason why we have these type of discussions put on YouTube and our channel on YouTube, is that they can see this is what we do. The next circle is religious outreach. This fourth circle is dedicated to the dilution of the Urantia teachings within the religions of the world. So for example, Urantia Book students might join a church and try to introduce the Urantia teachings to that church while it continues to remain a Christian church, perhaps the best Christian church in all of Christendom. And we could see that's with any religion, with any outreach project that we have, is to try to uplift the religions of the world while they remain their own religion, right? The fifth circle is social outreach, dedicated to the dilution of Urantia teachings within the society at large. We might think J.J. Benitez, we might think of the ideals presented in Star Trek or Norman Lear shows, or any such project that we have to reach society and try to upgrade the social cultures in which we live to more of a Urantia ideal. And then finally, the new philosophy of living circle. The sixth and final circle is dedicated to dilution of the Urantia teachings within human philosophy in general. This means a different approach to science, to history, to values, to life in general. This is obviously where we might say the works of Jeff Waddles belongs. So these are the 6 circles I've put out there, and I do not organize these circles in the sense of what's most important. I don't want you to think that religious outreach is more important than social outreach. These are merely organized, especially these last 4 circles, based off of how I think that that a Urantia community could organize a project to attack them. So I think that organizing the Urantia community for information outreach is an easier thing to organize than for religious outreach or social outreach, or to get the world to adopt a new philosophy of living. So, within this picture, we know that Urantia Foundation has dedicated itself primarily to this first inner circle, to the protection and distribution of the Urantia Book, while at the same time they've been supporting and experimenting in projects in these other circles, right? I might think that in the coming decades, as this protection and distribution work stabilizes and becomes more solid, the foundation might naturally begin to focus upon the next circle, upon education for Urantia Book readers. And we know that the foundation talks about how they are formed to be an education organization, that their primary goal is the education of, to the spreading of Urantia teachings and the education aspect, and that their first execution of this has been the distribution of the Urantia Book, but that they see other avenues for their service in the future. Urantia Association and other social organizations have primarily been dedicated to the second circle, while we've experimented with projects in the outer circles. As the education center becomes more organized, and if the foundation begins to operate more and more in this circle, and if local communities become more self-sufficient, then the association might naturally begin to focus our efforts more upon these outer circles. I think in a relatively short amount of time, let's say 15 or 20 years, the foundation might well be into its transitioning into focusing on education works. And the association will help continue to stabilize education works while shifting its focus to circles 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. As a community, what we have done is we come together and we say that, our focus is going to be in this second circle. So we say that the association's activities are organizing conferences, are organizing study groups, are putting together these education seminars. Well, we have these experimental ideas. So we'll go and we'll participate in a booth at the Parliament of World Religions. We will interact with Interfaith. We will support a project right now that's creating a video game app about Urantia teachings, but not about necessarily the Urantia book, to be released to the public, to see if that's a way of introducing Urantia teachings and ideals without necessarily preaching the book. And of course, and then individually, we all have passion projects, right? So I've got a passion project in the social outreach. My wife has a passion project in religious outreach. We've all got our own passion projects that we work on individually, and the community might support that either just with advertising about it or talking about it or giving you our moral support, and occasionally maybe even a little bit of money if we can get the money together to support these outreach projects. But primarily as an organization, we have focused on this second circle. I can see a future in a few decades where as this education circle becomes more stabilized, that we as a community begin to focus more on information outreach. And maybe that's where our new focus is that we are the representatives of the Urantia community to the world, right? And that's what we see the organized social organizations as doing while working with religious outreach and social outreach and the new philosophy of living. And as these circles become more stabilized, we begin to focus on the next circle going out and going out and going out. So that maybe my grandchildren, which, what is 40, 50 years from being really adults, so let's say 60 years from now, they might be talking about the information outreach being stabilized, and they're beginning to focus on religious outreach. So the purpose of this is not to say that this is where we are going and this is definitely how we will evolve, but it's to give us a vision of what generational handoff means in a social organization, that we understand where we are working right now in our generation, knowing what, after we've passed on, what the next generation might be focusing on, what the Urantia community might be doing in 100 years and what sort of outreach projects they have going on, so that it helps us better focus our own activity, and so that when we say that we want to give some time to the organization, we know what that means. We know where we're focusing on right now is the education of Urantia Book students while we're playing in these other circles. And so if you've got a passion project in religious outreach, you know that you just need to execute that yourself, because we're not stabilized enough in education for the Urantia Book students to take that on as a community project, right? So again, this is merely something that I put out there for discussion and for consideration. I do not mean to say that this is definitely the way things will go, or that my ideas absolutely represent the rest of the International Service Board or anyone else, but merely to give us a vision for where we might be heading. So, any ideas, questions, discussions?
Okay, I've got a question. When we go on the web and we tap Urantia, we may find the foundation, the IUI, and other association, but we also find many text and videos that are not necessarily true about the book, you know. So there are many negative influence that I guess Caligacia will be pleased, you know. So I was wondering, is there any data, or have you any idea of the harm that those part of the web may do to the movement?
Well, the internet is this wonderfully awful place, maybe is the word to say it. It really spreads our teachings out there well, but it also allows for them to be misrepresented. And so one of the functions, I think, of our organized groups, and right now we're talking mainly about the big three, but there's some other organized groups out there. What we want to do is we want to really establish the middle. We want to establish the normal middle of who we are as an associate or as a community. And we want to flood then the marketplace with these videos saying who we are and who we are as a community. So we're learning things like through Facebook and through YouTube that clicking like on videos really does help the next person come along and say, I want to watch this video as opposed to that one. If it's been watched 1,000 times as opposed to 20 times, we know that it's more representative if it's accumulated more likes. I have just, and again, this is because I'm not tech savvy and I just hate it. I hate the idea of going out there and telling people, we need you to go on YouTube and click like on videos for us. That's not something that I want to preach as a project for Urantia Association to be doing. Nonetheless, we know it is important, and we know that that's a way that people interact. And so I'm hoping that we have a good, active social media committee who will go out and tell people to do that, because it's just against it just affects me in my bones to go out and tell people that they need to click like on things. But nonetheless, we know it's important, and it'll help represent us. I see Jeff with a hand up.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been involved in is the Baha'i community, and they seem to be particularly ripe for the Urantia teachings, and it's sort of coincidental that they were coming together in Chicago about the same time the UB was coming together in that 1930s era. And they have this International House of Justice. And, you know, if we approach the International House of Justice correctly, you know, with the appropriate pitch for the Urantia book, I see that as a tremendous new religion. I mean, they talk about progressive revelation of Christ, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah, and obviously the Urantia book would be a beautiful extension of that. But it has to be pitched correctly and appropriately to the International House of Justice to be really well inculcated. Do you guys have anything, any involvement in that community at all?
I know of people who are readers of the Urantia book who are also involved in Baha'i. I don't see Sia on here. He's a man from Texas who was raised in Baha'i and now reads the Urantia book. I say that, you know, what I like to say is that we all go in a lot of different communities in our life, right? So I have my work community, I have my church community, I have my friends, I have my activities, I have the Urantia community. And part of what I do is I try to build short bridges between my communities. So I try to talk about, bring these Urantia teachings, you know, to my church, to my friends, to my activities by building just these short bridges that I'm able to do because I connect all of these places. For me, outreach to the Baha'i community would be a very long bridge because I'm not entirely familiar with the Baha'i community. I've been to the temple in Chicago. I could pass a 5-question quiz on it, but nothing in depth, right? So it's not my community to build a bridge to. But those who are involved in the Baha'i community, you're the ones who can build that short bridge because you're familiar with both communities. And what I inevitably find from a lot of people is that whatever communities, especially other religious communities that they're involved in, they see the connections. So, you know, we're members of a pretty liberal Presbyterian church, and we see the connections between the Urantia book and that branch of Christianity, and that's what we bring to it. And same thing with you with Baha'i. I've heard the same thing with various religions throughout the world, that the people who are involved in both communities naturally know how to bridge them in a way that I don't. So that's a very good project for you to do, and it's part of what I would call the religious outreach circle of service.
Okay. Thank you.
I see Gary. I also see him in green. I don't know if anyone else sees him only in green.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, there's 3 points I want to make, and I don't want to sort of set this out for discussion or whatever, and I think we all have our own personal developments within the Urantia book, reading it. I've always been taught, or I always thought that by reading the Urantia book, or anybody who needs to read the Urantia book, until your thought adjuster is ready, you can lead the horse to the water. You cannot make it drink. That's the main thing. But we are there to facilitate that, to make it available. And when we have I usually go meet, greet, and now it's meet, greet, and sometimes retreat. So you give them then that opportunity. That's the first thing. And what we are doing here today, and especially in Amsterdam, and of course at our wonderful meeting in Shani Manor in Oxfordshire in September, and everybody's welcome. That's what we're trying to facilitate. Secondly, when you said about the books, so on and so forth, and as you know, that they're coming from various areas of people who read the Urantia book. But one of the things that I come across, and I was absolutely amazed, and that is the Urantia book for dummies. Not saying everybody's a dummy here now, but that Urantia book for dummies actually sort of connects the Urantia book of where is it going? You know, why are we reading this book? And third point is my passion project. Is, as you know, or if you didn't know, I work with Hara Davis, and Hara's going to be at the get together in Amsterdam. I'm more likely going to be there as well if I'm still in the country. I'm usually between here and sort of West Africa at the present time. But this is the latest rendition she's going to have. Now this is absolutely this is the passion project. This is something that, you know, so Hara Davis, I'm not on there, but Hara Davis, this is my passion project. So we give the ability, and these books that she's got are the stepping stone to read that 2,097 pages. That's my passion. I'm done. Thank you.
And one of the things that we see, you know, I often leave publishing issues to the foundation, but one of the things we've seen come to the foundation is an encouragement of these small passion bridging projects that that help, you know, what I'm paraphrasing the Urantia book here, but that each apostle would teach their truths and the revelation as they understood it, and that Jesus would uphold all of those as being true, and he would wonderfully coordinate them together. And that the same thing is true with this, that each of us can go out and present the Urantia book in a way that, and the truths there and the teachings therein, in a way that we understand it, and it'll connect with people who have the same life experiences, who think the same way, or on the same wavelength, and you know, it's really focused upon them. And so, you know, we've seen this with what Hera Davis does. We've seen many children's books come out lately. We have seen comic books come out of Colombia, out of Brazil, all of these passion projects, and we'd like to see more of them. We'd like to see more of these type of things, because they really do, like I say, they build these small bridges between the people who think like I think and have the same life experiences that I've had, and helps bridge them to the Urantia book. At least I think it will. So
thank you, Chris, for your answer. Thank you very much.
yeah. Any other questions, ideas? Oh, I see Eric, and then I see Bennett. So Eric, go first. And anyone who I don't see, you're just gonna have to speak up, because like I say, I only see 16 people at one time.
I'm not sure if I understood you correctly 10 minutes ago about the media. What I understood, that we are not ready as an association, as a foundation, to go on the mainstream media. My question is, and I do agree with that, my question is, are we ready to respond to a controversy that may one day, maybe sooner than later, comes on the main media like CNN or BBC? So are we ready to respond?
Yeah, so one of the major things that this media consulting group brought to us, that said we really need to be prepared for, is that some crazy person does a crazy thing, and when they go and they search his apartment, they'll find a shrine. They'll find a copy of the Urantia book, or they'll find a shrine to the Urantia book, and that the Urantia book is then immediately associated with that crazy person and whatever crazy thing they did. And what I think, so what we've kind of came out of that meeting with is, we've got 2 or 3 people who are best at getting in front of the camera, and if that really happened, we would probably hire an emergency 24-hour media training session for those 2 or 3 people, and put them through the, put them through the ringer of what that means, and then put them on Good Morning America and hope everything goes well. So we're not well prepared, but we have an emergency response if we have to. But yeah, I mean, we're just not media savvy as a group. And I'm kind of dumb enough to think that that's actually a good thing, that that the Urantia teachings are meant to become diffused throughout society. They're meant to uplift from the bottom and not become this flashing light that spreads across the world through some, Oprah declaring the Urantia book to be great for billions of people, but rather that through the lives we lead, through the slow spread of the Urantia teachings, that in 100 years, that it just kind of comes out that everyone has heard of the Urantia book and everyone just thinks that it's normal, as opposed to the other way. But there are certainly those who feel the exact opposite, and they are my friends, so I don't want to say that they're absolutely wrong. Bennett, I think I saw a hand up from you earlier.
Good day, everyone. Good to see so many of you, even in name only. I couldn't help but be led, Chris, by your earlier presentation into the idea of seeing that we all who have committed a good portion of our lives to this revelation and who believe in what it's meant to do and who continue to grow in that awareness, that we naturally want to share it. But we typically, as Chris has at least implied, we typically share it based on what our reaction is to it, rather than an intimate knowledge of what our friend or our so-called proselyte might think about life. And so we all do well to be more interested in learning what the other guy, the other woman thinks, rather than so much what we think. Theoretically, we should already know what we think and be reasonably satisfied and assured spiritually in that regard. So in saying that, if we want the brotherhood of man, it's because we already partner with God and actively know God. We can't get to the brotherhood of man without that intimate relationship with the Father. So if you want to teach friendship with God, which is a motto of the ISB, you must first share the inner life with God so that you know what friendship you're teaching. You have to be a friend first. And in internalizing the revelation, in other words, the teachings of the revelation, not the book itself or the print thereof, but the real teachings as they're internalized in us spiritually, centers us so that we can relate then to the external world from an appropriate spiritual center. In other words, more and more in touch with the adjuster, irrespective of whether we're especially conscious of the adjuster's presence. We, yes, should work towards that in our inner life. Okay, and seeing many years into the future, we have the model that the UV gives us when it says in the social aspects of religion that religious groups should stick to religion. They should stick to what they know. They should promote the peace on earth and the enlightenment with God. But specifically, that is the restatement of Jesus' gospel without reference to the visible church. The teachings within each of us of our personal experience of what Jesus endeavored to get the apostles to do, most of whom didn't really grasp that till well after Jesus had ascended. And we have to remember all the time, and let this inform how we approach our life, that the Jesus Brotherhood is invisible and spiritual, exclusively spiritual. So, do the members exist out in the material world? Of course we do. But there are also all of the angels and the midwayers and all of the celestial beings who are part of this magnanimous project. And it is because we share the inner life, because we live in the invisible spiritual brotherhood, that the fruits which fall from that tree are what comes to replenish the world. It's not that we can share our personal experience with God directly, but we share the fruits of having internalized that experience. In this model, when it's adhered to, when our population, by population I mean our larger expanding community, which comes about through what? Thousands and thousands of study groups. And each study group is an island of a culture kind of floating or suspended in society, which brings new people in and sends new people out without necessarily that being the purpose, but that being the effect. And as many people as have these insights and spend their life immersed in this spiritual brotherhood, then we have the ability to influence the world as a whole, but only as individuals participating in society according to our various talents. Now, if we go out and try to change the world or take over the world, nothing good will happen. But if we stick to the business of God, then the things that come out of us will naturally be in relative harmony with those higher purposes. So what is our job in the material world? Well, first, it's to live in the spiritual world. And in that, we don't just provide teachers and leaders. What we're really providing is the teachings and the leadership to accomplish it. And that's how this world changes, and why it won't change in 3 years just because we want it to. And we may be entirely right in that hope. But the practical reality is this is an emergency revelation that's meant to unfold in an evolutional manner. And I've said many times that evolution always goes so slow. We all get impatient with evolution, and we never seem to notice quite when it passes us by. So it's very important to get into life from the internal first, and then let what's produced in your soul be what replenishes the world. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bennett. So we've reached 90 minutes, which is a good time. Now we say this could go 120 minutes, but I don't see a need to stretch it longer just so that we make time. So if conversation's ready to continue, I say we let it continue, but don't feel like you have to stick around because I'm about to say something new and ingenious. I'm not. I'm out of ideas. So now is the time for others to contribute your ideas, so please talk. Yes, Susan.
Hello, everyone. Oops. I noticed Jeff Waddle's hand up, so I would like to encourage him. No, you're passing, Jeff? Okay. Thank you. I just want to thank everybody. Well, now I've got the floor. My prayer for us, my hope is whatever we do, however we do it, that we work together as a team of brothers and sisters. And for myself, oftentimes it means pausing for just a moment before I express myself so that I truly am operating from the place that I will only encourage and never discourage another's actions. Thank you.
Jeff, did you have something you wanted to say, or was that just an inadvertent hand? All right, inadvertent hand. Kay Cooper.
I just wanted to mention the project that I put a little bit of information in the chat, because I think there's an opportunity to prepare the world in a very basic and fundamental way for what we are trying to do with this revelation, and that's through helping parents to raise their children with higher values. And I'm working on that, have been for several years, and I have just about ready to be able to send out material, my first stage of this. And I wanted to mention it in case there was anyone here interested in the idea of ministering to young people and their children at the same time, because when you teach young people how to raise their children with good values, it is of necessity a matter of their developing good values and making that connection with spirit. And the materials that I am preparing directly talk about connecting to each other spiritually and connecting to higher power, God, spirit, however a person might express it in their life. So it is obviously not directly related to the Urantia book, but very much based on it. And I think something that would be preparatory to leading people into that spiritual place where all of us can begin to serve this planet better. I'm a real believer in our becoming the believers in the Urantia book, becoming people who know God and who know our place as as children of God and to serve, especially allow our mother spirit to lead us in service, because she is the one who is, she is the queen of service. So I just wanted to mention those things in case anyone was interested in that form of service. I think we can do a lot to prepare the way.
Someone else like to speak up? All right, well, I have two pitches then. As I like to include in just about any time I'm allowed to speak to a group of Urantia Book students, is that a healthy Urantia community has one that has a rotation of leadership. That any one person taking the guiding reins for too long inevitably makes that organization about themselves. And so we need new leadership stepping forward constantly. And this is throughout every Urantia organization out there. And, you know, I particularly talk about the big three: the foundation, the fellowship, and the association, but also your local groups or any local projects. It's good to give time. That, you know, time is really the commodity that we have, right? That one of my guiding beliefs that I read when I was in college is that people who try to gather money in their lives are doing it wrong. That we should be trying to gather happiness. That happiness is the commodity that we're trying to gather, and what we have to exchange for that happiness is time. So we want to make sure that we are getting happiness in our lives in exchange for the time that we're slowly giving away. And I truly believe that dedicating some time to the Urantia Book and the Urantia activities and the Urantia organizations helps to increase the happiness for the Urantia community throughout the world. It'll also bring you personal happiness, but that this time exchange needs to be rotated. So if you have 6 months to dedicate to a project, please do so. If you have a year or 2 years, then step up and try to lead your local, your national, your international organizations and give some time to it. Yes, there are those like GARD and like Mo and like the Kulikis who are going to be involved with it throughout their entire lives, and they're just going to be exchanging titles and hats as they do so. But the true leadership and showing of a healthy Urantia community is those of us who are willing to step up and be organizational leaders for a few years and then get to step back and work on our personal projects then. So I encourage you all, if you have time and the inclination, to step up and lead some project. I say that everything I have done throughout my Urantia activities has been a true honor. And I would do so freely, and all of it has been wonderful. The only sacrifice I have made is that I have to care about money. That's really the sacrifice of being the international president, is I'm the one who has to care about the books for these years. And so we give these things freely, we give these talks freely, and I'm the one who gets to say, hey, every once in a while, if you have a spare $5, go and donate it to a Urantia organization. And I won't even say go and donate it to my Urantia organization, although please go and donate it to my Urantia organization. But if you've enjoyed yourself for the last hour and a half, 2 hours, $5 worth, go and click $5 and contribute it so that more of these projects can go forward and we can bring these teachings to more people and help make the Urantia community a little bit larger. Saying these things, like I said, it really kind of hurts me in my bones to say these things, but that's the sacrifice I'm making as president, is that I'm saying these things out loud, that $5 from everyone really does go a long way in the aggregate over the course of a year. So thank you for coming. If anyone has any more conversations, please contribute them. But if you would also like to go and enjoy the rest of your Saturdays, or if some of you, it might already be Sunday, feel free. Bye-bye. I see a lot of people waving. Bye. Oh, hi, Ivan.
Chris, Gary here, just to wish you, I don't think anybody's coming in, just to wish everybody a good time between now and hope they can make it to Amsterdam, and also if they can also think about coming to the United Kingdom one in September, you'll be well looked after. And good health and good speed to everybody, and see you soon. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Well, it seems nobody wants to speak.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris. Wonderful presentation. Very useful. It was very interesting to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing these. These are a wonderful and necessary new tool for the Urantia community. So you're doing a great job in putting these presentations together.
I agree. Thank you very much for coming and for giving us your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I got to chime in a few words here. Thank everybody else for their involvement. Thank you.